What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are here to talk about the Detroit Lions draft a little bit. Today, we're going to be discussing a rumor that has recently been out there all over the internet about Kayvon potentially at the number 2 pick, and the fact that Dan Campbell may not be a fan of Kayvon with the 2 pick in the draft. Plus, we're going to expand upon that a little bit more, talk a little bit more about the edge defender position for the 2 pick in this year's draft. And soon, not today's video, but soon, we will do our ranking list on the top 5 edge defenders in this year's draft. So let's get it started.
The city's been down, and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Okay, everybody, to my video. Glad you guys are here. It's good to be back for another draft video. And today, man, we're back to talk about the number 2 pick. I mean, that's what it's about. It's about the 2 pick in the draft. This next week is going to be really all about the draft, mock drafts, second round, third round, everything about the draft. I don't even know what's going to happen this week. However, the number 2 pick is what I wanted to talk about today, because there has been this report kind of out there, according to Albert Breer, that maybe Dan Campbell isn't a huge fan of Kayvon with the 2 pick in the draft. We know this is, I mean, it's just that time of year where you don't know really what's true or what's not true. And to us, if we may look at a guy and say, well, that guy's falling. You know, these NFL scouts, I mean, these guys, they've had the reports since December. So they know all about these guys. They followed these guys. Now it's about the meetings. It's about talking to people around him. This is also the season of smoke screens, of things being out there that aren't necessarily true. I've even been told that some of those top 30 visits that teams hold, sometimes they just do it maybe to talk and, you know, learn about another player, but also sometimes they'll do it completely to just throw off other teams. It's like, oh, hold up, maybe they're interested in that guy, and they're not even interested in that guy. So there's a lot of those games going on around this time. Do know that Brad Holmes has said that he'd be willing to trade out of the number 2 pick before the draft even started. Well, let's just assume Hutchinson is off the board. The Lions may be looking at this like, hey, there's multiple guys we'd be happy with drafting, is what they've told us, but at the same time, we take the draft picks and move back a few spots over sitting there at number 2 and taking a player. We don't necessarily think there's maybe that one guy that stands out. That could be a smoke screen for all we know. Who knows at this point? Report that has been put out there from Albert Breer states this. Let's read through it. Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated. He says this: a lot of people are convinced they will go with an edge rusher here regardless. Trade back, obviously everything opens up and it's like, whoa, anything could really happen. But especially if they sit at 2, I think it will be an edge defender. Cornerback, maybe a possibility. He continues with this. He says, and I'd agree that if Hutchinson is there, this will become academic for them. I actually do believe if Hutchinson is sitting there with the 2 pick, the Lions will select Aiden Hutchinson. Now, if they had a really nice trade back offer where they move back a few spots, they get a huge amount return, because the 2 picks value is through the roof. In perspective like this, a lot of teams, when they do their trades, the trade value chart does kind of line up with the value that is given for most trades. Let's say the Detroit Lions made a trade with the New Orleans Saints, who currently hold picks 16 and 19 after their trade. Not saying this is going to happen, but just hypothetical. If the Lions made that trade with the Saints, they got 16 and 19, they would also have to throw in next year's first round pick to make basically the trade value even for the number 2 pick. So it's a very valuable spot in the draft. Maybe at that point they choose to move back. But I do believe that they were stuck there and Hutchinson was there too, that would be the draft pick. He says this: if he's not, well, I can tell you that no one I've talked to at this point believes that Oregon's Kayvon is in any way a culture fit for Detroit coach Dan Campbell. We've seen it, for example, say with the Lions in free agency, where the Detroit Lions have brought in guys with the chip on their shoulder. They got something to prove. Albert Breer continues with this: his personality is a lot. And you hear the head coach there isn't a fan. The head coach there, Dan Campbell, isn't a fan. Now, he continues with this. Walker, on the other hand, Trayvon Walker out of Georgia, would make sense. If the Lions are confident they can develop him into more than he was on the college tape. The biggest issue there really is most of his splash plays in college were made in the open field situations where he's simply chasing someone down, what you'd hope he'd do as a pro, which is rushing the passer off the edge. I do want to say this about the Kayvon situation. We don't know about the off the field. This is the thing that the Lions are going to have to figure out, is the character of the player, you know, the mentality of the player. Because again, like Dan Campbell said, he wants players that love football. Remember what he also told us? He said, we can deal with, you know, some of the other things off the field. Like, for example, he brought up the example of that player that would come in and, you know, he just reeked of alcohol, but he loved football. It's kind of like, look, if the guy loves it, you know, he'll understand where I need to put my priorities in the NFL, because he loves this. He's going to put the extra time in. He's going to put the work in. We're going to coach him up, but he has just that mindset to get better, to be the greatest. It's not just he wants to be in the league. He wants to be the best player in the league, and he just loves the game of football. So Off the field things, we can deal with that as long as the guy loves the game of football. Now, when I think about Kayvon and some of the stuff that you've heard, like, oh, he's more invested on off the field virtual stuff, virtual currency, things like that, kind of like what Dan Campbell said, I don't think they're too worried about that kind of stuff, right? It's not like, oh, well, he's doing this off the field. It's, do you love the game of football to the point where you're going to improve or you're going to put that extra time in? Because, especially with the 2 pick, but with every pick, you're investing a lot of money in this guy. I mean, your 2 pick is supposed to be a cornerstone of your team. You're putting a lot in that guy. So do you believe not just what his athletic potential is, but the mindset, the mentality that he has, how much he just loves the game, the passion that he has for it, that he's just going to get better and better, keep working, play through injuries. I mean, do all of those things that you want that guy to do. Lead by example, be a great locker room fit. Is he that guy talking to, when it comes to talking to their scouts, having their scouts talk to his defensive line coach, talking to people around him? All of those things are things that, they'll have to figure out. Kind of the motor or effort questions that people have given him. Honestly, I went back and I think I've watched every single game now of Kayvon Thibodeau's last season, and we did the video on him recently. I've went back and I've watched games since. I really don't necessarily think there's much of an issue there in terms of motor, like he's not trying on certain plays. Run defender, I don't know if I would necessarily say it's a lack of effort. Definitely doesn't always look the same as it does as a pass rusher, right? Pass rusher, he's just going at it. But I also think he just needs to improve as a run defender big time here. We know he has good athleticism, but he just isn't a great run defender right now, especially when the ball is ran at him. And everybody knows it. Like, hey, how do we play against Kayvon? We'll run the ball at him. If you look at the Utah game, the Pac-12 championship this past year, you'll see them run at him. And I did. I looked for that, and you will notice that in that game, a lot of times they ran at him. He didn't make plays on the football. That doesn't necessarily say he wasn't trying. He didn't always make a play on the football, though. Speaking on Kayvon, and we'll get into some other stuff in a second. Speaking on Kayvon, there is one thing that I said even after doing that video that I really wanted to look at. I wanted to look at him in the past and see if there's been that improvement, because I think this is also something that definitely comes into play here. We talk about, well, what his potential is. Look, athletically, he could do this, he could do that. He's got the length, he's got the power, he's got, pass rush upside. He could become this type of player. And I don't think for Kayvon Thibodeau, no matter how his NFL career goes, there will ever be like, oh, he wasn't athletic enough to do certain things that we're asking. He didn't have the athletic upside to be this guy as a pass rusher. Power won't hold him back. I thought he actually got stronger. If you watch him in 2019 versus 2021, he looked built different. To me, none of those things will hold him back. But it is, as to what we just talked about with Dan Campbell, is that mindset, it's that mentality to want to be the greatest, to continue to work, to put in that off the field time. I actually just got done watching Taylor Decker yesterday, doing a report on Taylor Decker. My goodness, that guy is a freak athlete. Like, I didn't realize how explosive Taylor Decker was. They're all those athletes in the NFL. We've heard Penei Sewell talk about it. Look, he gave me some problems, when I was at Oregon, because he's just a great athlete. He just gave me some problems based on that alone. But I do have a slight question, and I could be off on this. I do have a question after watching, especially some of his older games and things like that, but even just watching his 2021, maybe why, to me, he seems so raw as a pass rusher. For a guy that's came out as a top high school recruit, defensive player in New York high school, comes into, Oregon. He's played almost 500 snaps in the first 2 seasons of his career. This past season played his most snaps. Why is he as raw as he is? Is that a defensive line coaching issue? I know they just got a new defensive line coach. Their other one has went to Miami. Or is that one of those things where maybe he's not putting in that extra time to really set himself apart? His meetings didn't go well. The Giants gave him a hard time. People talk about his personality. I got no issue with him. He's great on camera, right? He likes to talk about the love that he has for the game, to become the greatest, to put that extra work in, to do those things. And that is one thing that, to me personally, has come up a little bit as a question as I've continued to watch. He needs to improve his pass rush plan. I said that he wasn't maybe the most instinctive pass rusher. The counters weren't there. Always the ability to string off, but he shows you all the upside. The get off is ridiculous. Still has good enough length. Has tons of power. You see him went to the inside, outside. You see some rare glimpses here and there of spin moves, half spins. But maybe why isn't that as polished as you would hope? Washington State, he got rolling. That's why I say I think he runs a little hot and cold. He got rolling against Washington State, gave him a lot of problems. You see kind of just pushing the inside, then working back outside, setting up tackles. Just in that Washington State game, he just looked like he was a different athlete than everybody on the field. And that's awesome. But then you also watch games like the Utah game, specifically speaking as a pass rusher, where it's like you don't see him inside counter. You don't see him set up any inside counters, any of them, unless they send a blitz his way. Then he's forced to do it, and it works. So you do wonder a little bit about that. Why is that polish not there? And if that could just be as simple as, look, he doesn't have the coaching yet. Once he gets to coaching, the upside's through the roof. And look, I even said that in a video. I think this guy's got tons of potential. That'll be something the Lions have to figure out. And then, of course, the run defense. I think he could be a much better run defender than he is. but he's not a great run defender right now. He can be much better. I think he does do a really nice job, specifically as a run defender. Sometimes being able to read the offensive tackle, where the block is going to the middle of the field. He can read the tackle, how they're setting, and then he can work himself back into the play in the middle of the field. You know, we talked about some of that awareness there, but I do think he needs to improve a lot here. Shows the power. I didn't necessarily say, there was an effort off the snap. What's so interesting about this 2 pick, if the Detroit Lions were to go with an edge rusher at 2, as I said, all these guys coming out, you know, they always need work. They need polish. They need a great defensive line coach, but they have to have that mentality, that mindset to take that coaching and just put in a crazy amount of work to just find that little way to set himself apart. Because you can't rely on, I'm a great athlete. Not saying Kayvon's going to do this. I'm just saying in general, you can't rely on that. You can't rely on, I was a great athlete in college, just going to set myself apart in the NFL, because it won't. Hutchinson can improve. Kayvon needs a lot of work. Trayvon Walker needs a ton of work because he just hasn't played that role. Jermaine Johnson needs work. Whoever you're going with, if you did go into edge at 2, they all need that work. It's just about that willingness to put that time in and love the game. But because of that, I feel like any direction you really go at 2, that is something that you could really argue. You could argue for Kayvon. Hey, look, he's this awesome athlete. The upside athletically is great, but you also see that he's still pretty raw as a pass rusher in terms of pass rush playing consistency, being able to string counters off it. As a run defender, he needs a lot of work to me as a run defender. Lions, one thing that they do need, they need to stop the run. And Kayvon Thibodeau, where you take him right now and you put him in your defense, I don't think he's going to improve your run defense a ton. So there's that. You look at Trayvon, you're literally saying, okay, we're playing you at a different role in the NFL. I mean, than what he played with Georgia, which was a lot of times over a tackle or inside of an offensive tackle at college. He did play a little bit outside the tackle, but even like Albert Breer says, when you watch Walker, there doesn't seem to be many ways to win as a pass rusher on the edge. You don't see the spins, you don't see the swims, you don't see him beating guys on the outside foot. You don't see those kind of things in this game. You see the speed to power, you see a rotational guy, crazy length, crazy athleticism. You see certain reps and it's just like, whoa, my goodness. Like Albert Breer said, what he can do in space, he may be playing a much different role than Kayvon is. There still needs to be, for him, a ton of development. And even a guy like Jermaine Johnson, to me, I think Jermaine Johnson goes under the radar when you talk about what he needs in terms of development, because you think about it with Georgia, he played like an outside linebacker role, not necessarily the role that Trayvon's playing now, but at the same time, didn't get very many snaps when he was with Georgia. You move him to Florida State, now he's playing, averaging 61 snaps a game. He plays over 700 defensive snaps. And I got to be honest, when I watched Jermaine Johnson, we'll probably do a film video on him just specifically at some point. I think as the season went on, you literally saw him get better as the season went on, really start to figure out how I win as a pass rusher, right? And that's a huge part of it. How do I win? And then once I figure out how I win, how do I counter off of that? How do I continue to improve upon that? I can have all the athletic traits, but if I don't know how to win as a pass rusher, it's all for naught. So I think you could really argue that with any of those guys, Hutchinson, of course, I believe will go at 1, with any of those guys at the 2 spot, the Lions do it. So then it comes down to, look, you have some great athletes. Jermaine Johnson's an awesome athlete. Great length. Trayvon Walker, awesome athlete. Yeah, Kayvon, great athlete, quick first step. I don't think those other 2 guys, at least as of now, even challenge that. But they all need that work. We'll get into this more. We'll do a Jermaine Johnson video at some point, because the question, I think, is, should he be in play at the 2 pick? After going through, and I've watched, I think, 8 games. I have 8 games and then one from 2020, which was Alabama. I have it on doseofdn.com. I got to be honest, I think he'll probably be in play at the 2 pick. And I know that sounds crazy. Now, of course, this would be much better if the Lions could trade back. I know his stock has seemingly been rising. I initially looked at Jermaine Johnson. I said, look, this guy's a great run defender who consistently see the field because of what he can do as a run defender, but he wasn't a quick win pass rusher. He was a guy that kind of fell into sacks. You look at his statistics, which were awesome last season. He had double-digit sacks. I think PFF accounted him for 14. Other sites are like 11.5. He had 17 tackles for loss. His statistics are great, but he also played over 700 defensive snaps. But I was like, hey, look, this guy's a great run defender. He has all the measurables to be a great run defender. And as a pass rusher, he's more of a second effort, not a quick win pass rusher. But after going back through, rewatching a lot of those games, or also watching games that I haven't seen already on Jermaine Johnson, I have all this on doseofdn.com. I think Jermaine Johnson is the perfect example of, hey, you should probably watch games sort of in order. Take a look at what he was at the beginning of season to the end of the season. I think it's really important with Johnson, because while we say, okay, all these guys need development, things like that, Jermaine Johnson kind of goes under the radar when you think like that, because Jermaine Johnson started off at junior college, right? He's this #1 ranked player at junior college. So he goes to Georgia, plays at Georgia, doesn't play a ton of snaps, plays about 200 snaps each of his 2 years there. So he's not playing a ton defensively. The role was a little bit different than I think Florida State and how he was played. He played more as like an outside linebacker versus Trayvon, who plays, more head up over offensive tackle. So it's definitely different there. He wasn't on the line as much, which meant that he was dropping a little bit more at Georgia. And then he moves to Florida State, and you see his snaps skyrocket. Obviously, his stats followed. He wins his conference ACC Defensive Player of the Year. He's one of those guys that can easily be overlooked depending on which games you look at. You may say, well, look, he's only a second effort pass rush winner. But at the same time, what I noticed from going through his games, and I've done this with Kayvon as well, is I think for Jermaine, you can literally see the growth throughout the season as he starts to figure out, here's how I win, here's how I can counter off of that. The guy has, to me, very little athletic limitations. I say Kayvon's a little bit stiff, it looks like in the lower body. Do a full video on Jermaine Johnson at some point. I think we see with Jermaine Johnson, he can be, a little bit stiff at the top of his pass rush, the flexibility to corner there. I think Kayvon's much more flexible, especially in the upper body. But Jermaine Johnson, to me, what you saw throughout the season is literally how he got better every game. And to me, he looked not at all like the same player. The guy that you saw against Florida at the end of the season, the guy that you saw against NC State, against Icky at the end of the season, to me did not look the same as the guy you saw against Wake Forest or Notre Dame in week 1, week 3. He looked completely different to me. I also thought he looked a little bit slimmer. I don't know for sure, but he looked a little heftier at the beginning of the season. But he looked different at the end of the year. To me, he looked much better. He looked like he started to understand, here's how I win. He looked more explosive as a pass rusher, where you watch him beginning of the season, he sees a little hesitant off the line, goes immediately into a stutter, which means that he probably doesn't know exactly how he's going to win as a pass rusher. Less decisive off the line. And I think what you saw specifically early in the season, like I said, that Wake Forest game, he doesn't look as athletic as he did towards the end of the season. But when you watch him off the line, he's a little bit slower, but then he would allow offensive tackles to get in his chest early. They get him in the first 2 steps of his pass rushing rep, and his pass rush would end there. Using his hands to keep himself free, having a great pass rush plan when it came to attacking an offensive tackle. To me, he still hasn't shown that quick first step that a guy like Kayvon has, but Kayvon sometimes, if you get him wide enough, he doesn't even get touched working the edge. Jermaine Johnson, that wasn't the case. He also didn't really play that wide either, so there is that to throw in there. It's violent, great motor, just doesn't necessarily know exactly how to consistently win as an edge rusher. But then as you watch throughout the season, he becomes a little bit more explosive. You start to see more quicker reps off the line of scrimmage. He starts to win in this variety of ways, and you're like, oh my goodness, wait, there's actually a lot of potential for this guy. But I just want to kind of compare real quick Kayvon and Jermaine, and why, at least at this moment, after watching the 8-9 games that I have, and currently, I'll save it, but my grade is really good. I won't say whether or not I have it as better than Kayvon. If you want to know, go check out builtfromdan.com on who I have a better grade on. But I will say this, he should, I think, come up in the conversation. Does this mean he has to be the 2 pick? No. Let's first take a look at some of the measurables here. If you look at Kayvon, right, the guy, 6'5", 258, it always kind of moves around based on the combine when they gain and lose some weight. But he's got a great build for an edge defender. I think Charles said he was going to be around 255, 33 and 1/8 arms, 1/8 inch arms, very good sized arms. I mean, it's not going to limit him in any way with that kind of length that he also has. You look at what he did at the combine / pro day, 4.58 40, 159 10-yard split, 27 bench press reps, which would have been first for all edge defenders. It was first for all edge defenders at the combine. You see those numbers, like, dang, Kayvon, that looks good, man. It actually matches what you see. And then you see a guy like Jermaine Johnson, 6'5", 262. Now, I think he cheated a little bit because he did his bench press reps at his pro day, but he also added 6 pounds for his pro day. So I think he bulked up a little bit for that to make sure that number was a little bit higher. I don't know. Hey, more power to you, but I'm just saying, I think he cheated a little bit there, but it's okay. I like him a little bit more on the lighter side, where I feel like if he's at that 256, 255 range, just based on the eye test alone, to me, he looked a little bit quicker, but bulked up a little bit for the pro day for the bench press. I ain't mad at you for that. But the guy's 6'5", 262, 34 inch arms. He's got massive arms, 4.58, 32 inch vertical, which is a little bit, it's not great in terms of explosiveness. You look at speed grade. He was outstanding in terms of speed grade. His 10-yard split may have been unofficial, but it was a 1.55, which is just disgusting. That's faster than Kayvon's was. But I think it was unofficial. 32 inch vertical. Lay you down a little bit in terms of the explosiveness. That's where I think Kayvon is just a more explosive player, even though he didn't do his vertical. So there is that to throw out there. And to me, when you watch Jermaine Johnson, there's a couple things that he brings to the table. First thing is that if they immediately came in and they were both, hey, you changed nothing, you are who you are at the end of the year playing week 1, Kayvon to me would probably be a better pass rusher. But in terms of growth, how you think his mentality is, things like that, development, willingness to get better, take it and learn, you could argue that maybe you think Jermaine could end up better there. We'll have to see how the Lions go with that. We'll know when they make their selection at number 2. But Jermaine Johnson, first off, as a run defender, to me, is without question a much better run defender. Now, he did still seem a little bit lost at times on certain run plays and maybe necessarily how to attack that run play. Like I said, Kayvon Thibodeau, you'll see certain run sets where he'll notice how the tackle is playing him and he'll get to the middle of the field. About it being sucked out of the play altogether. Jermaine Johnson, I still think he's learning that a little bit from that role and getting more consistent reps from that role. Certain blocking schemes, it doesn't look like he approaches it the right way. You also did see him beat, like Kayvon, sometimes on zone reads. Kayvon got beat, I think, much more on zone runs and things like that and read options. But you do see him get beat a few times on read options, things like that. But as a run defender as a whole, like right now, it's not even close. To me, Jermaine Johnson is a way better run defender. I got him up there right up next to Hutchinson, right behind Hutchinson. The length, all the measurables to be great. The effort, the motor, plays so hard every single play. He works into plays. Talk about Trayvon, a lot of his plays are coming in space. And that seemed to be the case, especially early in the year with Jermaine Johnson. A lot of his plays that he was making were in space. He was chasing down something. But especially as the season went on, man, as a run defender, he is outstanding. He's plugging and play. He's ready to go as a run defender day one. Needs to improve what he's seeing and how he's approaching certain blocking schemes. The ability to just wall off guys. You saw it against Zach Tom. The guy can just completely wall off players as a run blocker. And that was honestly from the beginning of the season. Wall off guys, explode off the line. He basically just bench presses offensive tackles. I mean, that's what you notice. Now, Kayvon delivers a lot of power. Like I said, Kayvon's got good enough length and the power to be much better here. He's just not. Jermaine Johnson is a way better run defender. Gets under the pads. His pursuit to the ball is great. You see him in open space like Kayvon, but you get him in a straight line in a flat, he's running you down. He literally... There was one against Miami where they went to a wide receiver handoff behind the line of scrimmage. He made the play before the wide receiver could even turn the corner. He also is pretty head up against the run. Even though sometimes he doesn't attack blocking schemes perfectly, head up against the run where he's always seeing who has the ball in the backfield. He's not focused on who I'm going against. He focuses on walling him off, getting him off of me, and then where's the football at? Kayvon, to me, on the other hand, focuses a lot of times too much on the blocker and trying to explode through the blocker, move the blocker, and he completely loses where the football is. Jermaine's the opposite. He knows where the ball is seemingly at all times as a run defender. One more thing, because I just love his run defending. Well, I mean, there's little things here. Like sometimes he would get beat, like I said, on those read options, lose the play in the backfield because it wasn't that he didn't know where the ball was. You just can't really tell when they're kind of at that mesh point. So that was, the one issue that I did see that could be a little bit more consistent. But his disengage ability. Now, we talk about, his hands, how much length and how much space he creates. Those things are great, a lot of power. As the edge, you could tell that he understands that he wants to see the backfield, so his mission is to get on you early and create that space. And obviously, his length helps him a ton, but there's some long guys that aren't that good at this. But what I like here is the ability to disengage. And to me, it's all set up by him doing that work early in the play. By snap, winning the leverage battle, getting my hands consistently placed on your chest to the point where I can kind of just move you around. Almost felt like every other game, someone was on the ground. So he threw somebody on the ground every other game. I gotta believe maybe he took some of that from Georgia, because you look at what Trayvon, super long arms, the role they're trying to ask him to play. Trayvon, when he's good, he's really good at this. He can be very dominant, creating that space between him and the lineman. We see him when a tight end, you see the play against Michigan, and he just lights the guy up. Things like that, I gotta believe, like maybe he took some of that from Georgia and brought it to Florida State. So you kind of have that mix, right? Where Trayvon, you're like, okay, what is he gonna be? Even though they play a little bit different roles, what is he gonna be if we ask him to play more of an edge role? So a guy like Trayvon, seemingly his stock started to rise. Who knows if it did within front offices after the combine. But when I look at Jermaine Johnson, I'd rather have my guy's stock rise, even though he did have a good, pro day combine showing. I'd rather have my guy's stock rise because of what he did at Senior Bowl. And what you saw there where the Lions were coaching, Jermaine Johnson did go kind of nuts on the outside. And I think you have to watch through the season with Jermaine, because for me, when I first came into it, I was like, I don't think Jermaine's that great. Like, oh, he's just not going against good competition. And the offensive linemen there were a little questionable. But when you see what he was able to do throughout the season and the variety started to really pick up along the way, then you watch him in the Senior Bowl one-on-ones and he's unblockable. You're like, oh my goodness, this guy really, you're seeing the improvement where he's literally showing you him getting better. Spin move, you see his inside counter hand swipe and you're like, oh, that's pretty nice. You start to see that kind of pick up towards the end of the season when he started to involve that pass rush moves. Help it get excited. You watch him against Miami, he went crazy. And you watch a game like that and you see the ability to convert speed to power, the understanding, hey, I get him reeling a little bit, use my long arms and run through him. And the way that he plays with the strength that he has in his upper body, oh my goodness, he spun this guy completely around. You see the speed of power. You're seeing such a variety, but what sticks out to me is it's not just a variety, right? He starts to figure it out as the season goes on, and he starts to show you improvement to the point where he gets to the Senior Bowl and he's dominating everybody. Imagine what he could do with some NFL coaching. Here are his quotes. His quotes are like, hey, I don't listen to anything on the outside. The film will speak for itself. And while, again, I don't think he has the most quick wins as you would love to see, he needs to improve for a 2-pick. but any pick basically for edge is going to be that no matter who you take at that spot. So you see that speed to power, you see the spin move, which is disgusting. Inside pass rushing. He needs to learn a little bit more on the edge to me. He needs to be quicker off the line, but that comes with confidence in your pass rush plan and knowing how you're going to win, getting in situations where you can pin your ears back. The run defending, he'll immediately be able to play strong side defensive end. Lions, they don't have a guy that's great there. Charles can do it, and I think if he was your starter, he would do it, but he may not be your starter next year, right? Depending on what you do in the draft. Romeo is not a great run defender. Hopefully he improves, but this guy is a great run defender. So he'll immediately help you there because he can go on the strong side. He'll take on the tight ends. But man, I mean, what I like is that he's very violent, very aggressive with his hands. But as the season went on, you started to see a pass rush plan, a little more explosive off the snap. Those numbers, he should be much more quick off the snap than he really is. I think also part of that is sometimes he's focused on playing the run, but he looked quicker off the line than at the beginning of the season where he looked a little sluggish. He kind of slowed down once he got into a tackle and he's like, what do I do here? And it shows me that upside. You see a lot of times his go-to sort of became inside hesitation, Euro step, beat you on the outside. So jab inside, get a step, and then I beat you around the edge, which was countering off of it, which was an outside jab, beat you on the inside with an overhand swim move or a swipe, even the spin move. And this was where he was nasty. Ike Ekwonu, one of the top tackles in this draft, could be the top tackle drafted here, could be a top 5 pick, could be a Lions pick, probably not, could be though. You watch him in that game, handles his own as a run defender to me. No issues with him. So it just like, it just was like, okay, Ike's known as a run blocker. This guy is handling his own as a run defender. So I know he's going to be great there in the NFL. But when you watch him as a pass rusher, this is where you really start to see that growth. During that game against NC State, I put he was dominant because you watch him anytime he was lined up against the right tackle, not Ike, he usually was pretty dominant as a pass rusher. It felt like that, like there was multiple games, especially in the second part of the season, where you're like, oh my goodness, they can't block him. There was another game against Boston College, I think that was in the second part of the season, where they literally could not block him. Now, the second half, they seemed to have him a little bit more under control, but the first half, every play he was in it. Somehow, some way, he was in every single play. You see a high IQ play like this, where everybody's working to one side, the offense is trying to do this play action, naked bootleg, so everybody's supposed to be flowing on one side of the football. He from the completely opposite side, because we talk about having his eyes in the backfield and not being too engaged on who his blocker is. This is why also could help his blocking scheme recognition a little bit more, but that's just an area that he'll improve with time. But you see this naked bootleg, he's the only guy seemingly on the defense that even recognizes it, takes off completely the other way and chases the quarterback down. You're like, what the heck? How did he even see that coming? Those kind of plays show you like, oh yeah, he's definitely got his head in the backfield, because otherwise he would have had no idea this was happening. Ike won some reps here because he's a great tackle. He actually won, I think, most of the reps through the middle of the game as a pass rusher. They only matched up like 6 or 7 times. The first one, right, Ike gets kind of the win initially, and then you see Jermaine Johnson stick with it, show a little long arm, gets a little bit on his face, but continues with the play, runs the quarterback down. But then it was towards the end of the game where this guy against Zach Tom, you saw him do it to him. He was getting on him early. He was walling him off early. He was getting lashed in his pads. You're like, why does that keep happening? To me, it's because he didn't know how he won as a pass rusher. And when you're hesitant against a good tackle like Zach Tom, he's going to latch you right up and you're not going anywhere. You saw that more early in the season. You still saw it towards the latter part of the season, but it was much less, to the point where against Ike, the final one-on-one rep they had, he hits him with his nasty spin move, right? Ike's getting on him early. One step inside jab, beautiful spin balance, whiffs, and he's into the backfield. Development as a pass rusher that he has. I think he's lacking a little bit of twitch, where I think Kayvon's a much more twithy, just explosive athlete. Isn't that explosive to me, right? But at the same time, just the improvement. You see the leverage where you use him on stunts all the time. Good balance, gets low, drives into guards. I love his motor. There's no question about his motor. It's up there with Hutchinson, maybe even better. I mean, honestly, how about clutch factor? I know this usually doesn't come up with a pass rusher, but when I talk about him being the same player at the beginning of the game that he is at the end of the game, this is why things like that show up, and he prides himself on that motor throughout the entire game. He's talked about it. I think about Romeo against Chicago, the strip sack that he had in that game where we ended up beating Chicago. It was Darrell Bevell's first game as a coach. Look at this one, right? Kind of quiet against Clemson. They're down 4. Their offense isn't moving the ball. Here he is at the top of the screen here working against the tackle. See how much more explosive he is into his body. Strip sack, awareness to pick it up, and go take the lead. The length, the measurables are all there. He's a much better run defender where the Lions need a lot of help. So should this guy be in consideration? To me, absolutely should be in consideration at 2. We'll do a full video on him at some point. And that's not me sitting here saying he's better than Kayvon. But should he be in consideration? Yes, because it is all about the character. It is all about the mentality and what you think the player is going to become, not necessarily what he is now. Because again, if he just comes in, he is what he is and he never gets better. Same thing with Kayvon, Trayvon. But Jermaine, at his length, his dominant run defending, should be in play at 2 for me. There's one little thing thing I do want to point in here before we end this video, and that is the age side of it. You have to keep in mind Jermaine Johnson is a little bit older in terms of a lot of these other top edge prospects, whether that's Trayvon Walker, Kayvon Thibodeau, George Karlaftis. Those guys are 21 years old. Now, not by a ton. You know, like, for example, I think Kayvon and Jermaine Johnson are a year and a month apart. He's played at junior college. He's played at Georgia, now at Florida State. So he is a little bit of an older prospect, even though maybe the refs don't necessarily show that at the time of Georgia. He still is an older prospect, so there is that to keep in mind in comparison to some of those other guys. When you look at when the Jaguars drafted Josh Allen, Todd Walsh was the defensive coordinator there. They took him with the 7th pick out of Kentucky. That guy, I believe, was 21 years old, but he did have 4 years of playing experience with Kentucky. So that may be something that's worth mentioning. You know, some teams, they don't like getting those older prospects. I think especially once you push 23 and older, there's some guys that come under like 25, but some teams don't like those older prospects. And it's not to say like he's an old man, because again, I think it's only like a year and a month apart difference between him and Kayvon, I think. So it's not like this gigantic difference, but it is something that's at least worth mentioning. To me, don't know how they feel about Kayvon. It's smokescreen season. I don't know. And to me, if Kayvon is that guy that they believe, hey, look, this guy's going to put the work in, he's going to take the coaching, and he's going to get better, I don't care about his personality, because Kayvon has a ridiculous high ceiling in my opinion. But it's that question that the Lions had to figure out that I can't figure out. But based on what I saw, defender in the NFL, and should be in play depending on how the Lions feel about it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you feel about this Kayvon situation? Thank you, Pride, for watching. We'll be back this week to dive into everything draft. So let me know in the comments below what kind of draft videos you want to see, and I'm out.